You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 182 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. While I currently edit a conversation that I recorded for next week, I wanted to take some time to share some information on this episode. I have an update on a new Apple Podcast feature, some Bay Area announcements, mostly about the retreat, but a few others, and some listener feedback to read. Starting off with a new feature on Apple Podcasts, I noticed this last week when publishing episode 181. And so it is chapters on Apple Podcasts. I'm going to read just a little bit of information here. Chapters are a powerful tool for enhancing the listener experience of your podcast. They make it easier for listeners to navigate within the episode, help them to quickly understand the episode structure, and allow them to return to specific sections that pique their interest. And I heard about this a while ago, and this is something that podcasters can do on their own, creating their own chapters. But recently, Apple started automatically generating chapters. And this caused quite a bit of confusion when I was listening back to the most recent episode and saw a title that was not the title of the episode and was wondering what the hell happened. So looking at episode 181, which was T's first step, the first section is the introduction, and then another one was my intro to T's first step, and that was titled T's Presentation Guidelines. The next chapter was Childhood Trauma and Gender Identity, then Addiction's Roots and Body Image, Chapter 5, Teenage Motherhood and Addiction Escalation, 6, Powerlessness and Recovery Awakening, and then finally 7, Group Affirmations and Reflections. Even though I had another section there at the end, it included them in the last chapter. And checking out just a few other episodes, I noticed the same thing. So going back to episode 180, and this is with Jason L., the first chapter is the introduction, and then recovery practices, regulating the nervous system, adoption and spirituality, choice and self-love, yoga philosophy, updates, and then recovery playlists. So that's where I played some music. And so on here, it shows the length of each chapter, and you can jump to different sections. I haven't checked to see if Spotify is doing this yet, but it's interesting. And I don't know if this is for the entire catalog or just the most recent episodes. At first, I found it a little unnerving that it's automatically generating these titles for different sections, but they seem to be pretty accurate based on the transcripts that are automatically generated for each episode. So if you do listen to Apple Podcasts, check out that new feature. It's pretty cool. Moving on, I have a few Bay Area announcements. This upcoming weekend, we've got a busy one. Saturday, January 31st, we have our quarterly Beach Burn, which is a bonfire in Santa Cruz where we have a meeting and a speaker. And I have that announcement on the Bay Area website. I have yet to go to one, but this is in Santa Cruz. The following day, we have the Bay Area SAA and COSA Speaker Meeting. And this is held on the first Sunday of February, May, August, and November. So Sunday, February 1st at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. We will have 2 speakers, one from SAA and one from COSA, and this one will be featuring a recovering couple from Savannah, Georgia. So if you are interested in joining that meeting, the Zoom information is up on the Bay Area website as well. All of these announcements are under updates and events. You can click on that and you can see the various things that we have. And so the last one that I wanted to talk about, and this will take up a majority of this episode, is talking about our annual Bay Area retreat I am the outreach coordinator for the retreat committee and find various ways of getting the word out about our retreat. Our registration opened up last week, and I've sent out emails to various places. I also do announcements on the podcast, and if you're a regular listener, you'll recognize that I've done this over the past 3 years. And for this year, I'm going to be doing a bit of a clip episode. More on that in a few minutes. Our annual retreat will be held at Walker Creek Ranch in Marin County the weekend of March 13th through 15th. We've been there for several years now, and it is a fantastic weekend. Fellowship meetings, workshops, outer circle activities, you name it. We did open up our registration. One of the things I wanted to talk about is we have a new price tier. It's called the Half Day Camper. And registering for that gets 1 meal, 1 SAA meeting, and 1 workshop. And this is set apart from the day use, which is the entire day, which includes, I think, 3 meals, 2 SAA meetings, and multiple workshops, as well as all of the outer circle activities that we have going on. So beyond the day use, we also have our regular options of economy, which is what most people register as. It's kind of dorm lodging. We also have, for a little bit more, the semi-private rooms. Those are limited quantity, but you pay a little extra for some more privacy. And also camping is available. So we have lots of different registration points. In previous years, we've had a scholarship fund that pays for people who can't afford the entire weekend. This year in the registration, we have the pay what you can part of the scholarship, which allows you to pay for as much as you can afford, and the rest will be made up from the scholarship fund. Our scholarships are made available through generous donations from the fellowship, either coming from meetings or people making donations. We also have a new separate link for making donations to the scholarship fund for people who have that ability to give that little bit extra, so we can get as many people to the retreat as possible. All of the information that I've been talking about is available on our announcements page on the Bay Area website, and that includes the registration link. It has been pointed out from members of our fellowship, myself included, and other members of the committee, when we were putting the registration page together, the software that we're using posts the highest price point at the very top of the page. This set off sticker shock for me, and a couple people have sent in emails. I did let them know that it's a glitch in the system, but when you actually choose your different registration point, there are many different options available. In addition to the registration link, we also have a link for submitting workshops. And wanted to read this. Workshops are the heart of our retreats. Workshops should focus on an aspect of our program. This includes the 12 steps, program tools, or outer circle. So if you are interested in leading a workshop at the retreat, we do have that link available as well. I have done several workshops at the retreat, and some of them have ended up here on the podcast. The very first one that I recorded was in 2019, and that was called Everything You Wanted to Know About SAA But Were Afraid to Ask. And I did record that in order for me to learn how to edit podcast episodes together, as well as opening up conversations about things that people would like to hear on the podcast. Hi, my name is Jason, and I'm a sex addict.
Hi, Jason.
Welcome to my workshop. Everything you always wanted to know about SAA but were afraid to ask. One of the things you may be asking, what the hell is this thing? So Intergroup bought a digital recorder. I'm working on a podcast for the group. So if you listen to the previous episode, at the very end, I did read from our Out of the Fog newsletter that I was interviewed about the podcast and the origins, talking about the idea as well as taking it to people at the retreat to come up with various ideas on what they would like to hear. And that was 2016, 2017. In 2019, I recorded the workshop that I just talked about. And I also recorded a conversation that happened in between workshops that was used for episode 1 of the podcast. Last week, I was hoping to share a few clips from that episode as a celebration of the 5th anniversary of the podcast. A few months ago, I had a conversation with a program friend. He was talking about how many episodes of the podcast there were and how it's harder to find specific types of episodes, and was wondering if I could put together kind of like a best of or shorter episodes that pointed people in the right direction for certain topics. One of the podcasts that I listened to called Lore. On that podcast, each week when there's a new episode, a few days later, there's a shorter episode guiding listeners to older episodes that have a similar theme. And so I've been thinking about doing that for some of the various topics that I've been collecting information for, like First Step episodes, the Joe and Charlie episodes, group discussion episodes, the ones that I've done from the SAA and COSA Speaker Meeting, things like that, where I can name off all of the episodes up to that point that have a similar theme. So with this one, I did want to focus on some of the retreat episodes, going back to episode 1. I think I've mentioned this before, that the early episodes, I didn't do a whole lot of editing, and so I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I've used some of my editing tools to help clean up the audio and trim out some of the ums and uhs. And so here are 2 clips from the intro and the outdoor recording from episode 1 of the podcast. Thank you for joining me on this introductory episode of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. I'd like to share a conversation that I recorded way back in March of 2019 at our Bay Area retreat, a conversation that a few of us had. In between workshops, we were, sitting out after eating lunch. There's some people playing ping pong in the background, so you might hear that. But it was when I first got the digital recorder that I intended to use for face-to-face meetings.
All of the addictions, the problem is that everybody needs to recognize is that's a symptom of the disease. And that's really why I really appreciate SAA. It's not something that you can just cut out of your life. It's like something that's a part of your life. So they really focus more on your higher power and your connection with yourself and your feelings, as opposed to, I think this, for AA, I have so many friends in that program, and it's just like they're spinning their wheels to me. Like some of the stuff he was talking to me about, he was like, God, and then I went out on this date and she didn't have sex with me, so then I was pissed off and I was drinking, and I'm like, these are the things I talk about all the time. He's like,
work your steps around it.
It doesn't make any sense. And then the other one, he's like talking about being addicted to porn, and his sponsor tells him that it's not an addiction, and it's just so what are in AA, I'm like, why are they telling people these things aren't an addiction? It's like, what?
For episode 9 of the podcast, that was right after we had our first online retreat in 2021. When the pandemic hit in 2020, it was about a week or 2 before our retreat that everything closed down. So we were unable to do a retreat in 2020. In 2021, we decided to do what the Serenity on the Sound retreat did, take the retreat onto Zoom and provide speaker meetings and workshops in that format. And so for episode 9, my original intent was to have a group discussion on what people thought about that. No one was able to make it, so I ended up doing an impromptu workshop on music and recovery that I've done at the retreat and the convention. So kind of recreating that for the podcast. And that was my first introduction into doing music and recovery episodes. Listening back to that one, I would have edited a lot more before publishing, but hindsight is 20/20 and progress, not perfection. Just last night, I went to an annual open COSA meeting here called New Beginnings. It is in January of every year in San Jose, and it was really wonderful to connect with faces that I see on the SAA and COSA Speaker Meeting on Zoom. But I also got to hang out with Paul, who's been on a number of episodes, the next of which I will talk about in a sec, as well as his wife, Amy, who also made an appearance on episode 82. So that was me, Tim, and Paul talking about the retreat, and Amy jumped in for a little bit. And so I wanted to play a couple of clips from episode 82. This was in 2023, which was our first retreat back in person. And we wanted to do an episode talking about what the retreat was for those people who had just joined the program during the pandemic and had no idea what we were talking about. That was a fantastic episode. So here are a couple of clips from episode 82.
I wanted to swing back around, if I might, to one concern that both Amy and I had about going to the retreat, and that's that there would be potential sexual acting out partners there. Just that I act out exclusively with women, and there were, as you had mentioned, Jason, very few women who were in the rooms, but there were some. And likely at a retreat of, I don't remember, 80 people or something like that, there were going to be a few women there, women sex addicts, women who might have boundary issues, same way I've got boundary issues. And all of this stuff is going on in my head. So I went, I'm determined to be clean, to be sober, to be in control, to not let my addiction guide my moves. And, you know, I'm looking away from the women. I'm not talking to anyone. And I sat down with one gentleman at a table, you know, and so many great conversations strike up. And I just mentioned, I'm so concerned about the 3 women who are here at this retreat with the 80 of us men. And this guy looked at me and said, I'm gay and there are 50 other gay men here. What's your beef with like 3? Get over it. You know? I was like, oh, yeah, perspective, you know? Yeah. None of us are here to act out. None of us are here to be triggered or to, you know, it's all, every single one of us are there for recovery. So it was eye-opening, and I didn't worry so much about that anymore.
Yeah, I can remember there was a time where I did get triggered by someone, and it was an opportunity for me to work my program and just to say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit edgy right now, and, you know, pulled some people aside and just let them know. And just getting the words out really helped it dissipate. It's just like the longer it stays in my head, the worse it becomes. So yeah, I mentioned it, and all of a sudden it is a non-issue.
Yeah. No, that happens a lot at the retreat. I feel like, you know, the second you can speak to someone, you've got so much support from every avenue. It's just phenomenal.
That's what I would say too. There's so much acting out for me. It's like the weather. There's conditions that come together to support that. But at the retreat, there's so much support for the other way. There's so much support for authenticity and transparency, things that don't support acting out, actually. But to me, it would be a difficult place to accomplish that. But that's just the way that it feels, you know, when you go in that place.
One of the lovely actions that we do just prior to coming back is this reentry plan.
Yeah.
So, you know, you spend a weekend, you know, away at sex camp. You're filled up with all of this recovery strength and energy and excitement, and you're tired, and you have to come back to the reality that is, you know, our everyday lives. And, you know, as a sex addict, I've experienced the highs and lows of addiction. And even though this is a recuperating and recovering type of place, it puts me on a high. And then when I come back home, you know, sort of regaining this normalcy is an adjustment that needs to be made. And so in order to facilitate and help everyone in sort of returning to the normal, joyous, happy, and free life, as opposed to the retreat, happy, joyous, and free life, there's been this, there's sometimes workshops, but certainly reentry plan sheets, which discuss, hey, what am I going to do when I return home? What's the next meeting I'm going to get to? When am I going to call my sponsor? On what day and what time? What other program people am I going to call? What am I going to do to take care of myself? You know, to have thought these ideas out ahead of time and putting a plan in place so that we don't come home to a void and feel the loss as heavily.
Yeah.
It definitely is a different energy to come back from all of that support and to go back into kind of regular life. And I've even, I've become attuned to hearing the voice of addiction in I've heard my addict voice say something to the effect of, you've had this recovery over the weekend. It would be a great time to act out because you wouldn't fall as far, right? You have all this, it's not insane, right? But it's like you've done. Look, man, you have money in the bank. Like you put by going to this retreat, you banked a bunch. So, that's the type of twisted logic, though. Just act out, and you'll have, you can fall back on. Thankfully that hasn't been the case, but I'm just illustrating your point, Paul, about how important it is to have support because, I never know what turn the crazy is going to take. and so for me, it's actually an exercise in humility too. It's like, okay, I know that getting support would just kind of keep it going. And there was also, I remember too, wanting to get to the Monday meeting after this because I wanted some of that high back.
Yeah.
And the only place I could get, the closest I could get was to get back to like the Monday meeting.
Get back to recovery. Yeah.
At that retreat, I did a workshop that was based on the podcast. It was similar to the one that I had done in 2019, kind of an open-ended conversation around the podcast. Some people were brand new and hadn't heard about the podcast, so I did get to provide some background information on that, as well as other people's reflections about how the podcast has helped them in their recovery. And that was episode 89. I also got to play some clips from the Talent No Talent show on that episode. The next one that I want to play a clip from is the very next episode, which is episode 90, Women's Experiences at the Retreat. This one was a fun group discussion. Listening back to that one this week, I found a clip from my friend Julie that I really, really loved and wanted to play that here.
I did hear one comment at the retreat, and I've heard it before, but a man who says like, I didn't know a woman could be a sex addict. I didn't know that could happen. Or saying like, oh, like it's kind of like slowly dawning on someone that a woman might be more than a sex object. And there, I've heard, some men say like, oh, you've really helped me understand that, that women are more than just what I'm like fantasizing about or acting out with, that I'm glad on the one hand. And then, on the other hand, I'm kind of like, but also like, my recovery isn't for you. my recovery isn't sort of for you to get comfortable or to, recognize your own tendency to objectify or the fact that women are more than objects. And I think most men, especially men that have been in the program a really long time, obviously most of the men get there if they don't come in that way. But I will say that sometimes those comments are a little like, oh, come on, But yeah, I mean, the flip side of that is I have in my story, in my inner circle behaviors, I have some behaviors that are a little bit more aligned with what males often present with as sex addicts. And so sometimes it get like I sat in a workshop where I heard my story, but from a man, and that was incredibly life-changing because if it had only been women in that room, I wouldn't have heard my story reflected. So that's also amazing.
There are a lot of other clips from that episode that I could have pulled, but if you are interested, please check that one out. So moving on, I don't think I'm going to be playing any other clips from episodes, but in February of 2024, I did want to do an episode similar to what I'm doing now. Is a general information about the retreat registration being open and talking about the nature of what the retreat is. But I also had the chance on that to re-edit and repost an episode that previously I had pulled because of anonymity issues. The guest on episode 74 wanted his name scrubbed from the episode. He was happy to share the recording, but as long as his name was not attached. So I made it a bonus episode talking about the retreat and then reposting the entirety of episode 74. So at that retreat, I did a workshop called Service Keeps You Sober, and that ended up being episode 128. In January of 2025, talking about last year's retreat, I did a similar short episode. And at that time, I had previously pulled episode 30 at the request of the guest. And for that one, I chopped out the conversation. I kept a little bit of the intro and most of the outro where I had read some listener email as well as playing some music. So I was able to repost half of episode 30 on that one. Both the February 2024 and the January 2025 were called bonus episodes rather than having a specific number tied to them. So at last year's retreat, I did a workshop on music and recovery. And when I was recording it, I forgot to make sure that I had fresh batteries for the recorder. So I only got part of the workshop recorded, but it was such a fun experience. This year, I am not planning on presenting any workshops. I may be taking part as a panelist on one or two. I will also be co-leading an area assembly for the various areas that we have for the ISO. That includes areas 40, 41, 42, and 77. Those are all covering various parts of our Bay Area meetings, and that is ISO work. Basically, a gathering of all of our group service representatives. Each meeting can send a representative to an area assembly. The hopes with this one is twofold. One, to get areas 77, which is San Francisco, and area 41, which is the East Bay, getting some leadership in there so they can have their own area assemblies. Area 40, which is part of my meetings, which is South Bay and Peninsula, and area 42, which is Northern California and Reno, are already well established, and we're sending delegates to the international conference every year. But the other part of this is to establish this as an ongoing thing that we'll be doing at the retreat. Since there are about 200 of us there, a lot of the GSRs will be there from the various areas, since we're all there anyway to be able to discuss ISO business. So I am really, really looking forward to this year's retreat, and as always, going to be taking part in the talent show. I haven't quite figured out what song I'm going to play, but I am looking at a couple of different options. Speaking of playing guitar, I just posted a new video. I haven't recorded a video for social media in a long time. I think the last one I did was in May, and so after healing from my hip surgery, I'm back to playing and recording videos again. It felt really good. An outer circle activity that I've been neglecting for a long, long time. Really, really loving that. So before closing out this episode, I did want to read a few emails. Most of them are regarding episode 180, which was with Jason L. And this first one says, "Hi, Jason. Love the pod. 6 months sober from pornography, just hit 11 years from drugs and alcohol. Your work is meaningful to so many. Love that you're talking about music being a conduit to your spirituality. I feel that when you share lyrics and music with someone struggling, it brings so much light into a tough situation. Thanks. Best, signed F. P.S. You mentioned that you would share Jason L's podcast to listeners who emailed you. Would you be willing to share that with me? And yes, most of the emails that I got were requesting information about Jason's podcast. I don't do that publicly on the podcast because of our traditions. But if anyone does want that information, I'm happy to send that out, as I did with this one and the next one. And this one says, "Dude, Jason L. really caught my ear on episode 180. What is his podcast called? I want to hear more from him. Thanks for producing the pod. I've really appreciated it as I get serious about my recovery journey. Signed, T." I believe I had another one asking about Jason's podcast as well. I can't find that email here, but I did respond to that one. And this other one is very similar. It is about Chandler from episode 110. And this email says, "Hey, Jason, I was wondering if you can put me in touch with Chandler from episode 110. He mentioned that he's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which I'm also a member of, and I haven't met any members of SAA who are also in the church, so it would be awesome to connect with him and compare notes. Signed, B." And I responded to him and gave him Chandler's information. Most of the emails that I've been catching up with have been from outsiders looking to be guests on the podcast, similar to Chandler and Jason. I've had a few others that have been interested and willing to abide by our guidelines following the 12 steps and 12 traditions of SAA. And we will not be promoting whatever it is that they want to talk about, but I did have a great conversation. That one I'm currently editing for next week's episode. I also have a doctor lined up to talk about the clinical aspect of sex addiction, and still trying to schedule that recording, but excited about that one. This last email that I wanted to read just came in today. It says, "Hi, just a quick thanks for your great podcast and the work you're doing. I'm in Thailand, staying sober, and so appreciate your podcast here where there are triggers everywhere and no in-person meetings. Chris's share," and this is referring to Chris on episode 177, "Chris's share was exceptional and touched on so many areas in my own recovery. I too feel like I victimized women and objectified body parts. So grateful for the thoughts and struggles. It will help me in my own 9th step and living amends. Your work pushes my work out into the world. Nothing but love. Signed, Jay." Thank you so much for that, and I did forward that one on to Chris today. So I think that will do it for this episode. I was thinking about sharing a few pieces of music, but that will be on next week's episode. So if you did have any feedback for the podcast, like the ones that I read here, or if you have any music that you want to share with the podcast community, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. If you had a question about the podcast, the program, want to be a future guest on the podcast, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. I'm still scheduling new guests and have a couple of great ideas, as well as recording another first step this week. So I am remaining quite busy, but forever grateful. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.